I'm getting over a cold, so I apologize if my voice cracks a little bit. You know, up here in the Northeast, we've been battling some pretty cold weather, and I see a few local Pittsburghers on the line. So shout out to you guys. I'm currently in Pittsburgh. I know moved back here a few years ago. Melinda, I see you have a question. How do I get audio? Oh yeah, obviously she can't hear me. So Sherry, do you mind responding to her, please? So welcome everybody. We have about an hour today. We're going to be talking about the KTEA-3. We're going to be just doing a brief overview. We'll have a lot of information to get through today, so please stay with me. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll be able to answer them as we go along. As I said, this is just an overview, part one. We just wanted to give you some information to kind of get you started and to see what's coming up. And we also have a part two coming up where you'll be able to get a little bit more information about some of the details in the test. Well, let's get started. Basically, the KTEA-3, I just wanted to say, is coming this spring. So this is a good time for you to get some information about it and start planning for it for its release. What we're going to talk about today is some of the changes from the KTEA-II to the KTEA-3, some of the improvements and new tests and revisions and things like that. We're also going to talk a little bit about how the changes will impact the assessment of achievement. I mean, there are some great things happening with the KTEA-3 that I think you're going to like when you see them. And some of the additional information we get to in the next session, the overview part two, we'll get into that a little bit more. First thing I wanted to do is just get a quick survey of folks that have used either the KT or KTEA-II. You can use it now, you can use it frequently, infrequently, it doesn't matter. I just want to get a sense of who's familiar with this stuff. Okay, perfect. So it looks like we have most people who have experience with the KT or the one or two. So you're going to see a lot of the stuff that looks very familiar to you. For those of you who have not used the KT in the past, hopefully you'll get some information that will help you make your decisions about what achievement assessment will be good for you. I, in my professional practice, have used both the KT and the Wyatt tests quite frequently. So, you know, and I know it's a lot of a personal choice, but maybe you'll get some information today that'll help you make that decision. In terms of the KT, let's give a brief overview of what it is. Basically, it is a Kaufman test. The Kaufmans are actively involved in this test. This is the third edition. It is an individually administered measure of academic achievement, and it is going to be for kids grade pre-K through 12, and also the age ranges are from 4 to 25. When we think about the comprehensive form for KTEA-3, it is a substantial revision of the KTEA-II. You're going to see some important changes and some big changes that have happened since the last one in 2004. It is going to include updated norms. There are going to be 4 new subtests. There are going to be revised subtests with new items, and the content coverage is going to be improved there. We have a lot of updated art. And there's going to be some simplification of administration procedures that are going to be able to help you when you're administering the assessment. In terms of what's retained, the KTEA-3 does have 2 independent parallel forms. There's going to be forms A and B, and that's going to help you when you have to do different assessments for progress and things like that. I always like tests that give parallel form options. It really does help when you have to be able to measure, progress on interventions and so forth. It does cover a wide range of achievement domains, and it does allow you to help with error analysis capabilities, which is going to be similar to what you've been able to do in the past. In terms of some of the key updates, the age range was lowered to 4.0, and that was from 4.6. It's going to help you measure the kids in pre-K, and then the norms were added for pre-K kids. So you're able to really get those kids before they get into kindergarten. There is content. The content in the KTEA-3 was mapped to the Common Core state standard. So you're going to be able to get, and I'll show you where that comes in, but you're going to be able to get information there that really helps you make decisions if you are your district or your area is following Common Core. There are also provided intervention suggestions for parents and teachers, so you're going to see some useful intervention suggestions coming from the results, which is also a real benefit there. There are going to be moderate changes to current subtests, so those of you that are familiar with the past tests, you'll be able to see things that have been changed in those subtests. Oral expression was revised, and they separated out object and letter naming facility tasks. I'll show you those in a minute. When we think about some of the special features here, the comprehensive form does have a number of them that are going to help you when you're assessing academic achievement. The first one is that this test does measure achievement in reading, math, written language, and oral language. And it does allow you to be able to pull out a single assessment if you need to, or combine subtests if you need to assess achievement in one or more domains. So if you think about that, the ability to be able to pull out specific subtests and or use combinations of subtests really help you if you're in an RTI situation where you need to be able to measure skills prior to a comprehensive psychological evaluation and so forth. Allows you a lot of flexibility, and that flexibility is something that I know myself as a practitioner, I really value that. So the KTEA-3 is going to help you with a flexible assessment battery. The other special feature here is that the KTEA-3 does measure all 8 specific learning disabilities that are in IDEIA in 2004, as well as all the areas of impairment in the DSM-5. So let's look at some of the materials for KTEA-3. There are administration manuals. These are just some just some little pictures of it to show you what they basically look like. Administration manual, there's going to be scoring manual. We have STEM books. You can see the STEM books down there on the bottom. There are going to be record forms and response booklets, as well as written expression booklets. And there's also a flash drive. I'll talk a little bit about what's on that flash drive in a minute. But in terms of the manuals, we have the admin manual, which is printed. And in that admin manual, it's like any typical admin manual, which is explains to you how to administer, score, and interpret the KTEA-3. There's also going to be information there regarding content development. The tech manual is going to be on the flash drive. It's going to be one of the files on that flash drive. And the great thing about these tech manuals when we have them digitally is that they're searchable. So it's a PDF that's searchable. And it allows you to go through and easily find information about tryouts, standardization, norms development. All the norms tables are going to be on there. So, those searchable PDFs are a real benefit, not having to go through a specific printed manual to find those, I think, is a real benefit. Additionally, let's look at this. This is information about the scoring manual. The scoring manual is printed. And for those of you who like to use, give achievement tests a lot, scoring manuals are a real benefit. They really do help you, when you're in a bind about how to score a specific item. They will help you. But hopefully you guys can all see this. I know it's a little small. I apologize for that. But it does allow you to have item-by-item scoring rules, and the chapters include all of those that you see here on the left-hand side. And this is just an example I pulled out, but basically for oral expression. For item 4, there's a picture of a girl mopping here, and it gives you information about 2-point responses, gives you information about responses with errors, and it breaks down the error types, the task errors, the grammar errors, and so forth, and gives you information about how you should score those. So this type of information is going to be really helpful whenever you're scoring. In particular, things like the expressive subtests, the oral expressive subtests, the writing tests, and so forth. I mean, it's going to be very beneficial for you on those types of tests in particular. This is some additional materials here. We have the 2 STEM books. There's going to be 2 for Form A and 2 for Form B. There are going to be record forms A and B. There are going to be response booklets A and B, and then the written expression booklets, and you can see them over here on the right-hand side. There's going to be 2 of them. There are 4 different levels. So level 1 is pre-K through K, grade 1 and 2 is level 2, grade 3 and through 5 is level 3, and grade 6 plus through 12 plus is level 4. Okay, some additional materials that we we have on the flash drive, and I think this is something also that's really going to be beneficial to you, you're going to like, is that there are the audio files for both forms A and B. So any of the tests that require audio, they're going to be right on there instead of having to pop in a CD. The error analysis worksheets are also there, and they are reproducible. So, we're not going to get into error analysis much today. That's going to be something that's going to be coming in subsequent sessions. But whenever you're looking for specific strengths and weaknesses, and you're really looking for data-driven interventions, error analysis is really the way to go. And I think the ability for you to break down items and break down where a child is having difficulty with a specific task is a benefit. So, you can reproduce those worksheets and actually look at a child's performance and really get that data-driven decision-making going. There is, for those of you who prefer hand scoring or will be doing hand scoring, there is a hand scoring template on the flash drive that's reproducible. Just I want to make a quick note that scoring is also going to be available digitally through our Q Global system, so you don't have to score this by hand, of course, but if you choose to, there is a reproducible template included. There are also scoring keys for math fluency and silent reading fluency, you'll be able to go through and score those quite quickly. The Common Core State standards that I talked about before, there is an ability to be able to map those on the flash drive, so that information is there as well for easy use. Also, there is information about qualitative indicators. It's a qualitative indicators record form. Basically, what we're talking about is the ability to identify subtest-specific qualitative indicators, and we're really looking at things here that aren't captured in normal scoring. And what I mean by that is, like, for instance, on math, you're going to be looking at the strategies the child is going to use to complete the task. Did they skip over certain types of problems, for example? Or for writing fluency, did they make a lot of spelling errors? So that's what I mean by qualitative indicators. It's a real benefit here. I am going to get into that more in the second session of the overview, but I just wanted to give you a little foreshadowing of that, so you'll be able to find those reproducible forms on the flash drive as well. Let's talk about some of the subtests and go over a quick overview of the subtests. Oops, I apologize. I pressed the button too quickly. So for the oral language subtests, we have listening comp and oral expression. And listening comp is for kids pre-K through 12 plus. And each of the items that are in listening comprehension are going to require the examinee to listen to a sentence read by the examiner, or there's going to be recorded passages from the audio. And I apologize, I have audio CD here, but it's actually going to be on the flash drive. And then after the child listens to each of the sentences or each of the passages, they're going to respond orally to literal and or inferential comprehension questions. For oral expression, the student is going to respond orally with complete sentences, and they're going to be describing photographs that are presented in the STEM book. Now, the items do progress in difficulty. 1 or 2 target words are required in the student's responses, and I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. But the most difficult items on oral expression are going to require a response beginning with a phrase or a target word. So we do have those target words listed. And again, that is also for kids pre-K, 4 years old through 12th grade. Let's look at some of the reading subtests. So we have letter and word recognition, and that is, again, goes down from pre-K through 12 plus. The student in that test, the child will identify letters and pronounce words, gradually increasing difficulty. In reading comp, we are measuring reading comp in pre-K all the way through 12 plus, and this is an untimed test with silent reading, and there are going to be several different item types. Some of the earlier items are going to require matching a symbol with a corresponding picture. So it's going to be a similar word, and then they're going to have to match it with a picture. Later items are going to require reading a simple instruction and then responding by performing the action. So they're going to have to provide an action or perform an action after they read it. And then later on, some of the items are going to involve reading passages and they're going to be more and more difficult. And then they're going to have to answer literal and or inferential questions about them. So you see the developmental progression of these items, and they start out very simple, and they get a little bit more difficulty. They have a little bit more difficulty as they go along. So when we think about the most difficult items in here, they are going to require rearranging of 5 sentences into a coherent paragraph, and then they're going to have to answer questions about that paragraph. So we are moving from very simple items, of course, so we can measure the young kids and actually get a measure of reading comp in young kids, and then also the ability for us to measure reading comprehension in older kids with higher abilities. The 2 next reading subtests are silent reading fluency and reading vocab. Now, these 2 tests are from grades 1 through 12 plus, so we're not looking at the young kids here, and it makes sense, right, when we're looking at these 2 specific subtests. But for silent reading fluency, in that test, the child is going to just basically silently read a simple sentence and mark yes or no to indicate whether or not that statement is true or false. And they have a 2-minute time limit for that test. For reading vocabulary, the earlier items in this test are going to require the student to point to one of 3 words with the same meaning as a picture and a target word. So they're going to see a target word and a picture, and then they're going to have to pick which one of the 3 words near it have the same meaning. I'll show you that in a minute, too. And each of the remaining items does require the examinee to read a sentence, either silently or aloud, and then say or point to the word in the sentence that has a similar meaning to the target word. Now, we do have also some reading-related subtests, and they are these, the ones I've listed here. So nonsense word decoding, basically they're going to have to apply phonics and structural analysis skills to decode nonsense words of increasing difficulty. For phonological processing, they're going to have to respond orally to items that require manipulation of sounds. We're going to be looking at rhyming, matching, blending, segmenting, and deleting sounds there. For associational fluency, a student's going to say as many words as possible in 60 seconds that belong to a given semantic category. For those of you who give verbal fluency tasks, it's very similar to verbal fluency tasks that you see on many cognitive or neuropsych tests as well. And that last one that's listed there is object naming facility, which is basically a student having to name pictured objects as quickly as possible during 2 short trials. So some additional reading-related subtests. Letter naming facility. So we're going to be looking at a combination of upper and lowercase letters, and they're going to have to be able to name them as quickly as possible. And again, they have 2 short trials there. For word recognition fluency, the student is going to read isolated words aloud as quickly as possible, and they have 2 15-second trials there. And the final one I have here is decoding fluency. They're going to have to read isolated nonsense words aloud as quickly as they can during 2 15-second trials. Now, you notice that I went over many subtests related to reading. So what I can say about that is, psychologists and educators, we're always looking for something that is really going to help us understand the child's reading. And hopefully you saw in the past few slides that there are a number of subtests that are going to help you really get at the strengths and weaknesses for a child's reading. So, and you can take combinations of those. You can take single tests if you need to. They're really going to help you get at what are the strengths and weaknesses, where the errors occur in a child's reading. And I hope you were able to see that in just very briefly the overview of the subtests. Now, in terms of written language, we have 3 subtests: written expression, spelling, and writing fluency. And of course, we are able to look at written expression in young kids, and of course, that is going to be developmentally appropriate. Of course, we're only looking at specific skills in very young kids. But for pre-K and kindergarten, they're just going to be tracing and copying letters. They're going to be writing letters and words, and a sentence, of course, from dictation. At grade 1 and going up, they're going to have to complete writing tasks in the context of a grade-appropriate story format. When we're looking at that level, they're going to include writing sentences from dictation. They're going to have to add punctuation and capitalization. They're going to be filling in missing words, completing sentences, combining sentences. As the child gets older, they're going to be writing compound and complex sentences. And again, as the child gets older, they're going to be writing an essay based on a story. Now, spelling is just exactly what it sounds like. They're going to be basically writing single letters that represent sounds for early kids in kindergarten. And then the remaining items are going to require the students to write increasingly difficult words. We're going to have regular and irregular words as well, and those are going to be from dictation. Now, for writing fluency, this is going to be where a student's going to write one sentence for each of the pictures presented in their response book, and they're going to have to complete as many of those as they can in 5 minutes. So they're going to see they're going to see a picture, they're going to have to write a sentence, and they're going to have to do that as many as they can in 5 minutes. I apologize, my screen is looking a little strange here. Okay. Math subtests. So we have these here, math concepts and applications, and that is a test that's going to require a student to respond orally to items that require the application of mathematical principles to real-life situations. So we're going to be looking at number concepts, operation concepts, and we're looking at time and money, measurement, geometry, fractions and decimals, data investigation, and then we're going to also have higher math concepts. And that's from pre-K through 12+. For math computation, a student's going to write answers to as many math calculation problems as possible. We're going to be looking at simple counting, number identification, subtraction, addition, multiplication, and division. We also have fractions and decimals, square roots and exponents, and algebra. And then for math fluency is, of course, going to be very similar to math computation, but we're only going to be looking at addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division problems there, and that's going to be timed, where they can get as many as they can in 60 seconds. Okay, so let's look at some of the new and revised subtests. And again, please feel free to write any questions that you may have. In the chat box, I have Michelle Semlaska on as well. She'll be answering any questions. She is the product manager for KTEA-3. So if you have any questions, she may be able to help us out as we're going along. Okay, let's look here. This is oral expression. I just wanted to give an example. This is sample A, where you're going to be showing a picture, a very appropriate picture here, saying, look at this picture. A good sentence that tells about this picture is, a boy and his mother read a book. So the great thing here is you're going to be seeing actual pictures, and you're just going to be asking them to give a good sentence that tells about that picture. Pretty straightforward. Object naming facility, also pretty straightforward. What we see here on the top is basically what you're going to be reading, or what you're going to be seeing. What you see down here at the bottom are the actual images that the child is going to be seeing. So, they line up. So, the practice items are a child will have to say book, bird, ball, cat, cup, key, ball, cat, cup, book, key, bird. I think I did that right? That's exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at their ability to be able to name as many objects as they can quickly. I do see a quick question coming in about the KTEA-3 and the WJ3. I don't have a lot of information about a comparison there, but I do have information coming that I can really share today. I may be able to share a little bit more about that in our next session, in the overview session 2. But I do have some information in today's session regarding KTEA-3 and CHC theory, so I'll get to that in a little bit as well. So that's object naming facility. Letter naming facility is pretty straightforward. The child sees what you see down here at the bottom, uppercase and lowercase letters, and they're going to have to say them as quickly as possible. You do see that for the practice items. They're going to be expecting them to name them all correctly, and if they do, you continue. If they don't, you discontinue. Okay, so let's talk about some of the key updates as well. There are going to be 4 new supplemental subtests, and those are the ones that I have listed here: math fluency, silent reading fluency, reading vocab, and writing fluency. In addition, we do have the KTEA-3 scoring on Q Global, like I talked about before. If you are not familiar with Q Global, it replaces the computer-based scoring programs that we've had in the past. That's Psycore and Harcourt and everybody, AGS, that we've had in the past. Q Global is a new system that is web-based. You can go to helloq.com, www.helloq.com, to get more information about it. There are also some, I think, some videos there about KTEA-3 in particular. But please feel free to go check it out. It is, the benefit of it is you don't have to be tied to a specific computer. I can't tell you how many times I talk to and I consult with schools, one of the biggest issues is having to share a computer or share scoring programs between multiple clinicians. So basically, QGlobal gets rid of that. So math fluency. This is just what math fluency looks like. Pretty straightforward. Very similar to other fluency tests that you've seen before. But basically, a number of math problems in a row, and they have to name as many as or finish as many as they can correctly in a time limit. Silent reading fluency, exactly what you're seeing here. They have to read what they see on the left and then answer yes or no. So is water dry? Are some apples red? There's sample items, and then you have the teaching items there as well. Do cows fly? Do trains swim? Etc. So exactly what it sounds like. You're reading basic sentences and having to go through and mark yes or no correctly. This is reading vocabulary. So I'm going to show you that in a second. Well, actually, I should go to the next one. I have the bottom grayed out a little bit just because there are actually some items down there. I didn't want to show too many items, but I have the teaching items here. So, for example, this is what I'll flip back to that other page. I have them in reverse order, unfortunately. But basically, you will be showing them what you see down here at the bottom. You'll see a picture with the word next to it and then 3 words underneath it. And you're going to be asking them to basically point to the word or say the word on the bottom that has the same meaning as the target word up here. So, for example, this one here, which one of these words can also mean house? The words are door, home, ride. Which one of these words can mean house? And, of course, the correct answer is home. So that's basically what this item or what this test looks at. This is the record form. You can see the first one, the target word is house. The responses are door, home, and ride. The second item, which is a teaching item as well, the target word is see, and the responses are step, feet, and look, and you'd be expecting them to say look. So you can see that. That's basically how the task progresses. Okay. Writing fluency. This is what the writing fluency booklet looks like. Again, we have some sample items here at the top. Just a picture of a girl running, and a girl is running is an appropriate sentence. Pig sleeps, for example. The rabbit is eating a carrot. The boy is reading a book. You can just give some basic examples down here as well for teaching. And they have a 5-minute time limit for those tests. Okay, so hopefully I was able to give you a quick little overview, and again, we are just doing an overview today of some of the subtests and some of the changes, so hopefully that gives you a little snapshot of some of the new stuff that's coming along. In terms of the composites and subtests, in terms of where they fit in the composites that are being developed, I apologize. Anyway, so my controls are not working correctly today. I apologize for that, so I'm having a little bit of difficulty. If you see a bunch of arrows coming up on the screen, that's me trying to flip the screen. Anyway, we have basically a general academic skills battery, and that's made up of reading, math, and written language. And you can compute these composites by giving you see 6 subtests listed here. So letter and word recognition and reading comp for reading, math concepts and application and math computation for math, and written expression and spelling for written language. So you're able to get that general academic skills battery with 6 subtests if you desire. We do have reading-related subtests and composites. So we have them that are listed here. So sound symbol, made up of phonological processing and nonsense word decoding. We have reading understanding, which is reading comp and reading vocabulary. Decoding, which is letter and word recognition and nonsense word decoding. And reading fluency, which is going to be made up of all those 3 fluency tasks: word recognition, decoding, and silent reading fluency. Oral language subtests are oral fluency, and you would be giving associational fluency and object naming facility. For oral language, you would be giving associational fluency, listening comp, and oral expression. With regard to cross-domain subtests and composites, this is also going to be helpful for error analysis and processing strengths and weaknesses analysis as well. So hopefully you can see all that information as we're going along. But you're able to look at orthographic processing by looking at spelling and letter naming facility and word recognition fluency. You can look at specifically, general academic fluency by looking at the writing fluency, math fluency, and decoding fluency. And you can analyze comprehension with reading comprehension and listening comprehension. And expression by including both the oral and written forms of language expression. So you can see here, the great thing about looking at some of these cross-domain subtests and composites are that whenever you are trying to decode error analysis or decode what's making up a child's performance, you can actually, so you're giving, for example, I'm just going to give a quick example, you're giving reading comprehension. If you want to make sure that comprehension is not the issue, you would give a test like listening comprehension as well. And you can really compare and contrast those to determine whether or not their reading comprehension is they're having difficulty there because of difficulty with listening comprehension or comprehension in general. And then if that's not the case, then you break down reading and where exactly is their reading ability and standing and so forth. So you're able to really compare and contrast a lot of these subtests that are similar and come up with a very comprehensive and detailed analysis of skill. Something that I think you're going to enjoy and benefit from. I did say that we were going to look a little bit at the KTEA-3 scores and IDEIA. So I do have them listed here in a little chart, looking at the areas of achievement. So in order to qualify a child for learning disability, we're looking at the areas that are here on the left, and we have listed for each of the subtest or for each of the areas of achievement. Not each of them. Oral expression, listening comprehension, and math problem solving, we have one-to-one correspondence. So there's one subtest on the KTEA-3 that corresponds to each of those areas. But if you look down here, basic reading, reading comprehension, reading fluency, written expression, and math calculation, we have multiple subtests included on the KTEA-3 that you can use for that analysis. Now, best practice is that you're using more than one data point to make a determination about learning disability. So in most of these areas, you're able to look at KTEA-3 performance. Hopefully you're also using other data points as well to make that decision. For the math problem solving, oral expression, and listening comprehension, you do have data points coming from the KTEA-3, but you will also need to look at other data points as well when making those decisions for diagnostic disability categories. So really, the most important thing I wanted to show you from here, and the most important piece of information that I hope you get, is that the KTEA-3 is providing numerous data points to be able to make decisions with regard to special education classifications. And when we're looking at, hopefully this isn't too small for you as well, but when we're looking at the DSM-5 areas, KTEA-3 scores can be used again as data points for the decision making when we're looking at the making a clinical diagnosis if we're out of the school, if we're not in the school environment. When we're looking at impairments in reading, the DSM-5 will look at breaking down those impairments in terms of word reading, reading rate or fluency, and reading comprehension. And as you can see here on the right-hand side in the corresponding KTEA-3 subtests, you really do have a lot of information, a lot of data points that are going to help you make that decision. So you can actually use this to really accurately identify impairments in reading. When we're looking at impairments in written expression, we're looking for spelling accuracy, grammar and punctuation accuracy, clarity, and also clarity or organization of written expression. And again, we have a lot of that information included in KTEA-3. Spelling, written expression subtest, essay item. So we are able to look in detail also at written expression to make these decisions. And when we break down here into impairments in math, we have to look for number sense, memorization of arithmetic facts, accurate or fluent calculation, and accurate math reasoning. And again, just wanted to show you this just to show you how they correspond. But the KTEA-3 also does have subtests that line up to those impairments on the DSM-5. So really the point of these two slides, if it wasn't apparent in what I was saying, is that you're able to take specific subtests from the KTEA-3 and align them with whatever decision-making tree that you need to align with, whether or not you're going from a clinical decision-making model with the DSM-5, or whether or not you're going from educational decision-making with IDEIA and special ed classification. Okay, I gave up there. So I did want to show you, I had that question come up about the WJ3 and the KT. I do have a chart here that is going to help with making the decisions regarding KT3 alignment and CHC classifications and broad and narrow stratum. So basically what we're looking at here is this is just a reproduced table that you can find in the manual, and all of the other subtests are also going to be in the manual. And I couldn't, of course, pull them all out. I wanted to make sure that you could see it. But basically what you're looking at here is that each of the subtests line up to specific broad and narrow abilities as delineated in the Cattell-Horn-Carroll theory. So if you if you follow that type of theory to be able to decode skills and to make decisions, you're able to do that. What I like to say is that a lot of times we're looking at, whenever you're looking at two different tests, they may use very different terminology for how they describe a skill, but a lot of times we're looking at the very same things. So and that's very true for cognitive tests. It's very true for academic achievement tests. And the reason why I really like these types of tables is it really helps us as school practitioners, as clinicians in the field, to be able to make decisions when we want to think about a larger picture. If you want to think about the processing of the GFGC components and how they work together, and you like to think about them that way, you can do so. And the tables are going to be in the manual for you to be able to do that. So this is just an example. You see here, for example, this is a straight one-to-one, right? So reading comprehension is, corresponds to GRW with reading comprehension. Oral expression is a GC, communication ability. So you see they line up pretty well, and the additional stuff is going to be in the manual for you to be able to look at. I did get a question from Kathy about can we get copies of the last two slides. I will do this. I have these. What I'll have to do is whenever I do these as handouts, I have to remove any test data. So any items, any stuff like that, and I can put them together as handouts and send them out to you guys. We can send them out to everybody who's a participant. The problem is with those last two, they may be a little bit small to see if they're in a typical handout. So let me see what I can do. I can maybe blow those two up in particular and put them out to you, and we'll see what we can do. But I'll get these out to you in a handout after our session's finished, maybe in the next couple of days. Okay? Let me know if you have any other specifically that come up. The other one is, the next slide here is, information processing approach. So, again, this is another popular approach for determining disability, depending on what part of the country you're in. But this is just an example. Again, I do say here that other subtests are in the manual. I just wanted to show you what this type of a table looks like. But listening comprehension, it breaks it down into input, processing, and output. So we're able to look at the input for listening comprehension being brief oral instructions, and then there's auditory verbal. Some of the earlier items are spoken by the examiner, and then there's an audio recording later on. So we know that that's the input required for listening comp. The processing that's required is basically language comprehension and listening ability. There is going to be sequential processing required here. Auditory verbal working memory is also required. And then this subtest also requires executive functions in terms of sustained attention, short-term memory for details, discrimination of essential and non-essential information. So it does require those four areas. And then the output for this test is oral response, a verbal oral response. And then there are also open-ended and multiple choice questions. So the reason I like this type of a table is it really breaks it down for you, helps you understand where what is required for this test in terms of input, output, and processing. And if you see some difficulties, if a child's having difficulty on the test, you can really think about what it takes and where the child's performance broke down. Whenever I'm teaching about assessment or giving an assessment, one of the most important suggestions I give is to actually watch what a child does. Make sure you can see how they're going through the process, see how they're processing the input, what's going on when they're actually thinking about the test, and how they give you the output. And I think if you follow that type of practice, the analysis of academic achievement is going to be, your analysis is going to be that much more powerful or stronger. So, this type of a table really helps us think about that in a little bit more detail. In terms of the model of assessment, the KTE comprehensive form, just like its predecessors, was developed from a clinical model of assessment, really to provide more than just norm reference scores. So one of the benefits to using something like the KTE, for those of you who have not used it, and also to the gentleman who asked about the WJ, one of the benefits to using something like the KTE is really to think about more than just norm reference scores, thinking about error analysis, being able to give yourself data-driven decisions for instructional interventions, how to actually think about what should you be recommending based on areas of strengths and weaknesses, and that's something that the KTEA-3 is very good at, being able to offer that type of analysis instead of just thinking, okay, well, what is a general reading score? Now, I know in schools we have to provide that a lot of times. I mean, we are driven by regulation. And oftentimes people want to see those scores, and I think that they're helpful for descriptive purposes. But what really matters, what really matters to me is this slide right here, being able to think about strengths and weaknesses, academics performance, and where it is falling apart for specific kids. Now, the KTEA-3 doesn't take into account things like, of course, social-emotional functioning, etc., but you can really break down, a lot of the academic areas and make those data-driven decisions about interventions. So, I think that's an important thing to note. In terms of those interventions, also, there are intervention statements that come along with the error analysis results as part of the clinician report that you give to teachers and other clinicians. Okay, so the clinician report is something that would come out of Q Global. So when you do the online scoring and reporting, the report that comes out from that are going to be, it's going to be the error analysis. If you do the error analysis, then you have the intervention statements as well. In addition, like I mentioned before, there is the parent intervention suggestions, and they are going to be part of the parent report. Again, you can run a parent report from that system that will give parent suggestions. They are going to be fun, playful. They're really going to help parents in the home, not have to drag their kids kicking and screaming to be able to do educational activities. I mean, I have a 5-year-old and an almost 2-year-old, and I know I try to do fun educational activities with them all the time. And my daughter is 5. She's really starting to like that. So as long as we can make them playful, make them fun, and we really get kids, involved in this stuff at home, I think it really does help in the long run. So, that's something that's provided here as well. So that's another benefit that you can give out to parents at meetings and after evaluations. So we have some subtests here with similar formats. There are pairs of subtests. So, for example, reading comp and listening comp, written expression and oral expression. They were developed to have similar formats, and that's to enable useful comparisons, like I mentioned before. So, for example, when we want to compare reading and listening comprehension, written and oral expression, they are very similar formats. They really allow us to compare and contrast performance on those. And I know I mentioned this earlier. But, this bottom point here is that the comparisons do help you distinguish specific problems in reading and writing from just more general language problems. I've been asked in the past, why are there language subtests on academic achievement tests? And it is exactly for this last bullet here. Yes, speech and language evaluations are going to be much more comprehensive, and in no way should, the language tests on the KT3 be used instead of comprehensive language assessments when they're called for. However, when you have to do an achievement or an academic assessment, and you don't have that information, it is very helpful for you to be able to compare and contrast written and oral language from each other, general language problems, writing problems, etc. So that's why it's there. And I do suggest, if you haven't been in the practice of giving the oral language tests in the past, that you get into that practice, because it is something that's going to be helpful for you to be able to make these decisions with a little more accuracy. Okay, in terms of the approach to assessment, when we think about the KT3, there is colorful, tongue twisted there, art and novel approaches to the assessment of several skills, and really they're designed to encourage examinees' best efforts. So we were looking at really pushing kids to do their best. I have an example here on written expression. The examinee will complete tasks by working through an age-appropriate booklet that tells an engaging story. So the story that's going to be there is going to be engaging for children. It's going to be age-appropriate. So I think that when you're looking at using a test that is sensitive to the developmental and age levels, the KT3 does hit that. So we're not looking at giving an item to a kid that's not going to make sense for their age. In terms of norms, so just quickly I'll go over some of the norms and some of the additional test development information before we finish. And then I think we may have some time. I'll be able to go through some of the questions that we couldn't get to, and I may be able to answer some of them before we finish. But let me go through some of these development issues, some of these development points, and then before we finish today. So in terms of norms, the norms have they're based on two separate representative nationwide standardizations, one in the fall and one in the spring. So if you're using grade-based norms, you have fall and spring. You're able to analyze based on fall and spring. And what you're able to do then is really look at examinee performances throughout the year. And the benefit, again, benefit to that is if you're using the KT for progress monitoring, if you want to use that as part of your progress monitoring, you're able to look at fall and then spring later on. And if you have both forms, Form A and B, you can do that. You can do it that much more accurately. The alternate forms, again, we have A and B, and they were developed and normed simultaneously. And of course, approximately half of the standardization sample was taking each of them. The retesting was done with the alternate form. Basically, when we retest with an alternate form, it reduces the effects of practice. So that's why I said that it was helpful for the accurate measurement of progress. It really does reduce practice effects. In terms of bias review, in terms of whatever can impact the performance, our child's performance on a test, the KT3 did undergo extensive bias reviews and statistical analyses to ensure that examinees of either sex and from a variety of ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds can be assessed with confidence. So all of the tests from Pearson go through extensive bias reviews. The KT3 is no different. Not only bias reviews from clinicians and experts, but also statistical bias reviews. Okay. In terms of relationship to ability tests, now, the first thing I want to say is that a subset of the KT3 standardization sample was administered the KABC-II and or the Differential Ability Scale 2 to provide basically a source of information about how academic strengths and weaknesses may reflect strengths and weaknesses in processing and reasoning. So there was a good extensive study done, KT3, KABC-II, and DOS-II. I do have some additional information, though. I have a WISC-5 study there. There is a WISC-5 study that's also being done right now with the KT3, and that's going to come out this fall. So I just want you to look out for that kind of information. The study that's going on with the WISC-5 and KT3, has some additional impact as well, because there's a lot of stuff going on about determining ability or processing strengths weaknesses there. So look out for that study and that information in the fall as it's finished. Okay, I just wanted to give you that as a little foreshadow. Okay, in terms of ordering, you can go online. I have the website on the next slide, but just wanted to give you this basic information here about ordering the kits. You can pre-order today, and there's a code there, and you have 10% off the published prices. And that I crossed out the April because that is extended through May of 2014. So you're able to do to order that through May of 2014 for 10% off the published prices, and the prices are listed there. If you haven't found already, the website is right there, pearsonclinical.com/education. And the only thing I said, I think our website's maybe going through some fixing, but if you don't put in the HTML, you won't get to that site. If you get to pearsonclinical.com anywhere, you can always put in the search terms KT3 and you'll get to the website specifically for the KT3, but that web address that you're showing right here takes you right to education. Put in KT3 and you'll go right to that website. So hopefully we have enough information in today's session to get you interested to be able to come back for more information. I do have another session coming out. I don't have the exact date. It is in March. Michelle, do you have the exact date that I can just kind of shout out to people while they're here? And then, if you want to attend that as well, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about some of the components that I had listed here. So hopefully you all found that helpful. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. I'm going to go back and see if there's any in particular. Did anybody see any particular that they had that wasn't? If your question was not answered and you have a burning question, just throw up your hand. There's a little hand, raise your hand, and I can kind of look through what your questions were. Oh, March 27th. Thank you, Michelle. March 27th will be the overview session 2. I had a question from Jan. Let me see. Jan, did you put yours in the box? Let me see if I had it. Colleen. I do have a question from Colleen. It's Q Global's web-based. Yes, okay. I don't have, Colleen, I don't have information about pricing for that. I think Michelle might have that. Oh, Michelle already put this stuff in. $2 per report is the current fee. There are quantity discounts available, and there's possible offering that she's working on now. Hopefully details are coming soon about that information. I did not see an oral reading fluency subtest in which the student reads passages. Is that correct? Let me go back here real quick to the reading subtests. Okay, so Colleen is asking about oral reading fluency subtests in which the student reads passages quickly. So reading subtests, we have reading comp, letter, word recognition. We have silent reading fluency, so it is where they're actually reading. They're not reading passages here. They're actually reading sentences. So simple sentences, and they're marking yes or no. And that would be the correspondence to what you're asking. But they're not reading it orally in that subtest. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, silent reading fluency. That's correct. I did have a question about anything on the correlations of KT3, DOS, Wyatt 3 Wechslers. Yes, Dr. Singh, that's coming through. We don't have that information yet, but that is all that stuff is coming. So not on the Stanford Binet 5, but on other subtests you have listed there. Yes, correct. We will have that information coming, but we don't have it yet. We have another question here. Jada, did you put your question in the bottom? Jada, do you mind putting that in again? And Jan, do you mind putting that question in again just so that I can read it? I have a lot of questions, so going through them is a little bit difficult. Oh, the error analysis webinar. I'm not sure we'll get into the error analysis as much, but the next one overview is March 27th, and during that session, we'll be able to get into a little bit more about it. Yes, but again, we are still early. Publication is not until the fall. So again, this is just preliminary information. We do have a lot of stuff that is pretty straight and standard, but we know it's going to be the case. But just keep that in mind. We don't have every piece of data yet, but we are going to be able to look at that in a little more detail. You're welcome. The current price of the KTEA-3 is right here. Here you go. We had some questions about KTEA-3 and Q Interactive. I think Michelle may have answered that question. Oh, Jan, I don't have information about the complete battery time. Michelle, I don't think we have that information yet. Do we? If we do, can you put that in? I don't think we have all that information yet. I think that, Jan, quickly, but, what I'd like to say about that is I don't know about the complete battery, but each of the subtests, if you've given the KTEA-3, are going to be very similar, probably a little bit shorter just because of the revised administration, tiny bit, at least what it used to be before. We haven't heard anything back from research regarding the time yet. So, but one of the things I want to make sure that, and I know that I talked about this before, is the KTEA is going to be, it was developed so that you can take out subtests or little small combinations of subtests. So, there may be some situations where you need to give the entire test, but many times you're probably not going to need to give the entire test. The assist scoring software, Doug, there won't be an assist scoring software. It'll all be through Q Global, which is the online scoring and reporting system. Okay, any other questions as we go? We're coming to the end of our hour. Hopefully I was able to give you all some good information. If you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in. What time is the webinar on March 27th? I believe, let me look at it real quick. I believe it is the same time. Oh, actually, no, I think I have it listed as 12 to 1 Eastern. I have it listed as 12 to 1 Eastern. Oh, it's at 1 Eastern. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. It's at 1 Eastern. Karen is asking about. Oh yeah, see, Michelle is clarifying. It is. I was right. It is 12. It is noon Eastern. We just switched it up a little bit for people in case they wanted to come on at lunch on the East Coast. In terms of the entire KTEA-II, Karen, I don't have that information in front of me. I apologize. I could look that stuff up, but I would imagine for the entire battery, it's going to be depending on age, of course, because you're not going to be giving all the batteries, all the tests for each of the age ranges. But you're going to be looking, it's about the same as most achievement tests. But I don't have specific information, so I can't give that to you. I apologize. All right, everybody, we're at the end of our hour. So thanks again for coming. I really appreciate you all listening in, and I appreciate the questions. Hopefully I was able to answer them all. And I look forward to you all coming to the next session in March. So, and if any of you are attending NASP, there will be a lot of information there as well. So have a great day and stay warm.